Max Verstappen just put the International Automobile Federation in the most dangerous position in Formula One. Change the 2027 engine rules, or risk losing the driver who defined an entire era. And this is not about Max being angry after one bad race. It is much bigger than that. Because behind the scenes, Formula One is fighting over a rule that sounds small, but could decide whether Verstappen stays, retires, or detonates the biggest driver crisis Red Bull has ever faced. The issue is the engine balance. 50-50 means half combustion, half electric power. But Verstappen's line is clear. Move it to 60-40, give more control back to the driver, and Formula One still has a chance. Refuse, delay it, or let politics block it, and Max may walk away while he is still at the peak of his power. That would not just hurt Red Bull. It would shake the championship, split the paddock, expose the weakness of the new regulations, and force fans to ask one brutal question. Has Formula One built a future that its greatest driver no longer wants to be part of? Because Canada did not end this crisis. Canada revealed the truth. And now the International Automobile Federation has to make a decision that could change Formula One forever. Subscribe to the channel. At first, this sounded like a normal Formula One headline. A world champion is frustrated. His car is not where he wants it. Red Bull looks vulnerable. The media hears one strong sentence, turns it into a storm, and suddenly everyone is asking whether Max Verstappen is really ready to retire. But that version misses the real danger. Because this did not start with one bad session. It did not start with Canada. It did not start with a difficult Red Bull weekend. This started when Verstappen looked at the future engine rules and questioned whether Formula One was still building cars that drivers actually want to drive. That is a much bigger problem. Because a champion can survive losing. Verstappen has never needed the sport to be easy. He has built his entire career on pressure, conflict, and the kind of precision that makes other drivers look uncomfortable. He can accept a fight. He can accept Red Bull falling behind. He can accept that no team stays on top forever. But what he cannot accept is a car that no longer feels natural. And that is where the 2027 engine debate becomes explosive. The International Automobile Federation is not just dealing with percentages in a rule book. It is dealing with the feeling inside the cockpit. The feeling a driver gets when he touches the throttle, commits to a corner, trusts the rear tires, and believes the car will respond exactly when his instincts demand it. That feeling is invisible to fans. But for a driver, it is everything. From the outside, a Formula One car can still look fast. It can still tear down the straight, brake late, and throw sparks under the lights. The lap time can still look impressive on a timing screen. But inside the car, the story can be completely different. If the power delivery feels artificial, if the electric energy has to be managed too carefully, if the car changes character depending on how much battery is available, then the driver is no longer just attacking the lap. He is negotiating with the machine. And Max Verstappen does not want to negotiate with a race car. He wants to fight it, trust it, and control it. That is the heart of this crisis. The original direction pushed Formula One toward a 50-50 power split. Half combustion power, half electric power. On paper, that sounds balanced. It sounds modern. It sounds like the future. But to Verstappen, that balance may create the opposite feeling. It can make the car less direct, less instinctive, less alive. Imagine trying to sprint while someone else controls when your shoes give you grip. Sometimes they help. Sometimes they hold back. Sometimes they respond exactly when you need them, and sometimes they make you hesitate for one tiny moment. That tiny moment is everything in Formula One. At 200 miles per hour, hesitation is not just uncomfortable. It changes the entire lap. It changes the braking zone. It changes the exit of the corner. It changes whether a driver attacks or protects. And Verstappen's greatness has always come from attacking with total confidence. He is not just quick because he has fast cars. He is quick because he can live at the limit longer than almost anyone else. He senses grip before others trust it. He commits before others are ready. He repeats lap after lap with a kind of cold precision that turns pressure into a weapon. But that only works when the car speaks his language. If the car starts speaking in calculations, energy states, and delayed responses, the bond changes. And once that bond changes, the entire Verstappen question changes with it. This is why the proposed 60-40 solution matters so much. To casual fans, 60-40 sounds small. Just a shift in numbers. More combustion, less electric. A technical adjustment that engineers can argue about in meetings. But for Verstappen, it is not small. It is the difference between a car that feels controlled by systems and a car that gives more authority back to the driver. That is why his position has become so clear. Change the rules for 2027, and the future still has a path. Fail to change them, and retirement becomes more than a rumor. That is what makes the International Automobile Federation's position so difficult. This is no longer a quiet technical discussion. It is now tied to the future of the most important driver of the modern era. And every side has something to lose. If the International Automobile Federation moves towards 60-40, some manufacturers may feel punished for following the original direction. They may have invested time, money, and development into a system designed around the stronger electric balance. Changing the target could damage their advantage. But if the International Automobile Federation refuses to move, it risks sending an even more dangerous message. That the future of Formula One can be designed without listening to the drivers who actually have to race the cars. That is the tension nobody can escape. Because Formula One is not only an engineering contest. It is not only a manufacturer battle. It is not only a regulation document. It is a human spectacle. People do not fall in love with Formula One because a battery deployment map looks clever. They fall in love because a driver brakes later than should be possible. Because a champion trusts a car at the edge of disaster. Because for 1 second, human instinct and machine performance become one violent, beautiful thing. That is what Verstappen is protecting. Or at least, that is what he believes he is protecting. And this is where the story becomes even more uncomfortable for Formula One. Because Verstappen is not a driver who sounds trapped. Some drivers need the paddock. They need the attention, the ceremony, the pressure, the cameras, the feeling of being inside the center of the sport. Leaving Formula One would feel like losing their identity. Verstappen has always seemed different. He loves racing, but he does not seem addicted to Formula One spotlight. He has other projects, other passions, other ways to compete. He has already won the titles that most drivers spend their whole lives chasing and never touch. So when he says the future has to be worth it, the threat feels real. Not theatrical. Real. That is why this story grew so quickly. The paddock understood that this was not just anger after a frustrating weekend. It was a warning from a driver who might actually choose peace, family, and other racing projects over spending years in cars he does not enjoy. And that gives him a kind of leverage most drivers do not have. Not political leverage in the official sense. Emotional leverage. Commercial leverage. Sporting leverage. Because if Verstappen retires while still capable of winning, Formula One will not be able to explain it away as a normal ending. It would not be age. It would not be decline. It would not be a driver slowly fading from the front. It would be a statement. A statement that the new direction pushed away the driver who most clearly represented raw speed, ruthless consistency, and total commitment. That is the nightmare scenario. And Red Bull knows it. Because while the International Automobile Federation debates the future, Red Bull is dealing with the present. The RB22 has not given Verstappen the platform he expects. It has shown flashes, but also deep weaknesses. The car has been unstable. Its operating window has been narrow. It has not always allowed Verstappen to attack with the trust that made his best years look effortless. And that matters because present frustration makes future doubt sharper. If the car was difficult now, but Verstappen believed the next era would fix the feeling, he could endure it. Champions can survive painful seasons when they believe the pain leads somewhere. But if the present is difficult, and the future looks even less enjoyable, then the entire calculation changes. The travel feels heavier. The pressure feels colder. The politics feel more pointless. The sacrifice begins to look too expensive. That is why his retirement threat has landed so hard. It connects the technical, the emotional, and the political in one line. Change the rules, or risk losing me. For the International Automobile Federation, that is almost impossible to ignore. But it is also almost impossible to satisfy cleanly, because changing rules under pressure creates another problem. Rivals can say the sport bent for Verstappen. Manufacturers can say their investment was weakened. Teams can say the process was unfair. And fans can argue over whether one driver should have that much influence. This is what makes the whole situation so explosive. There is no clean solution. Only consequences. And that is why the first block of this story is not really about whether Verstappen is angry. It is about whether Formula One has accidentally built a future that makes its most important driver question the point of staying. Because once that question is out in the open, every technical meeting becomes a power struggle. Every comment becomes evidence. Every delay becomes suspicious. Every race weekend becomes another test of whether Verstappen's patience is running out. And the most dangerous part is this. The real decision may not be made on track. It may be made in a meeting room. A room where engine percentages, manufacturer pressure, and political compromise could decide whether Max Verstappen continues in Formula One, or walks away while the sport is still convinced he never truly would. Then the fight moved from emotion to politics. And that is where the story became even more dangerous. Because in Formula 1, a driver can complain about a car and the team can respond. Bring upgrades. Change setup. Adjust the balance. Study the data. Promise that the next race will be better. But when a driver complains about the direction of the regulations, the problem leaves the garage. It enters the rooms where the future of the sport is negotiated. And those rooms are not built for emotion. They are built for power. That is why the International Automobile Federation suddenly found itself in the center of a storm. Because Verstappen's words did not only put pressure on Red Bull. They put pressure on the entire system that created the 2027 engine direction in the first place. The public question sounded simple. Will the rules change? But the real question was far more uncomfortable. Who controls the future of Formula 1? The governing body. The teams. The manufacturers. The commercial side of the sport. Or the drivers, the only people who actually feel the car at the limit. That is why the 60-40 proposal became the most important number in the paddock. Not because fans suddenly care about engine percentages. Most people do not watch Formula 1 to calculate power splits. They watch for battles, pressure, risk, rivalry, and moments where a driver does something that feels impossible. But those percentages affect everything behind the scenes. A 50-50 split pushes the car toward a stronger electric identity. It makes energy deployment, energy recovery, battery use, and software control even more important. It asks the driver to think not only about speed, but about when to use power, how to save it, and how to survive the lap without losing the electric boost at the wrong moment. That might sound like a smart challenge. But for Verstappen, it appears to cross a line. Because there is a difference between a driver managing a race, and a driver feeling like the machine is managing him. That difference is small on paper. Inside the cockpit, it can feel enormous. And here is the part that makes the political fight so tense. Not everyone loses under the original direction. Some manufacturers may have already built their future around the stronger electric side. Some teams may believe they have found an advantage. Some engineers may feel the 50-50 concept rewards the work they have already done. Some rivals may quietly think that if Verstappen dislikes the new cars, that is not their problem. In Formula 1, sympathy has limits. If a rule hurts your opponent, you do not always rush to fix it. And that is the cold truth behind this debate. The sport may talk about entertainment, fairness, and the quality of racing. But every team is also protecting itself. Every manufacturer is protecting its investment. Every technical department is asking the same ruthless question. Does this change help us or hurt us? That is why the 60-40 proposal is not just a technical correction. It is a political weapon. For Verstappen, it is the minimum signal that the sport understands the danger. For Red Bull, it could be a way to keep its star driver emotionally committed to the next era. For teams that prefer the current direction, it may look like the sport changing the game after the game has already started. And for the International Automobile Federation, it creates a trap. Move too quickly, and people will say the governing body bowed to Verstappen. Move too slowly, and the sport may lose him. Do nothing, and the entire retirement threat becomes the biggest unanswered question in Formula 1. That is not an easy position. Because no governing body wants to look weak. No regulator wants to seem like one driver can force a change. Formula 1 has always been bigger than any individual, and the moment it forgets that, the politics become dangerous. But there is another side. No governing body can ignore reality either. And the reality is that Max Verstappen is not just another driver. He is the driver around whom an entire era has been measured. Whether fans love him or hate him, they react to him. They argue about him. They compare everyone to him. He gives the championship a center of gravity. If he is on the grid, every race has a question. Can anyone beat Max? If he leaves while still near the peak of his powers, the question becomes something much darker. What did Formula 1 do to push him away? That is the nightmare the International Automobile Federation has to avoid. Not because the sport would collapse. Formula 1 would continue. The cars would line up. The lights would go out. Someone else would win. A new story would be written. But the wound would still be there. Because it would not feel like a natural ending. It would feel like a rejection. A rejection of the direction the sport chose. And that is why this debate has become so charged. The International Automobile Federation is not simply choosing between 50-50 and 60-40. It is choosing what message to send about the future. Does Formula 1 want to become more like a high-speed energy puzzle, where the smartest systems and most efficient deployment define the battle? Or does it want to protect the feeling that the driver is still the one bending the machine to his will? The answer is supposed to be both. That is the ideal version. Modern technology, but still human. Advanced engines, but still emotional racing. Sustainability, but still danger. Efficiency, but still instinct. But Formula One is now finding out how hard that balance really is. Because once the driver feels pushed away from the center, the entire illusion begins to crack. And Verstappen is the worst possible driver to expose that crack. He is not famous for being diplomatic. He is not famous for hiding discomfort behind soft phrases. He does not usually decorate his words to make people feel safer. When something feels wrong, he says it in a way that sounds almost too direct for a sport built on careful messaging. That directness is part of why the threat feels so serious. If another driver made the same comment, people might wonder whether it was designed for negotiation. With Verstappen, there is always a different fear. What if he simply means it? What if the sport waits too long, expecting him to soften, and he does not? What if the politics move at the usual slow pace, while his patience is already running out? That is where the timeline becomes important. Because Verstappen has not positioned this as a vague complaint about some distant future. He has connected it to 2027. He has connected it to the specific engine direction. And he has connected his continuation to whether the rules change in time. That phrase matters. In time. A solution that arrives too late may not be a solution at all. If the sport tells him the fix can come later, after another season of cars he does not enjoy, that may not be enough. For a driver already questioning the cost of the calendar, the travel, the pressure, and the mental load, one extra year is not a small request. 1 year in Formula One is enormous. It is hundreds of days of sacrifice. It is airports, hotels, briefings, physical training, simulator work, sponsor duties, race weekends, media questions, and pressure that never fully switches off. It is a life lived at speed, under inspection, with very little room to breathe. Drivers accept that because the reward is worth it. But if the reward starts to disappear, if the car no longer gives that raw feeling back, then the entire deal starts to look different. That is what the International Automobile Federation is facing now. Not just a technical complaint. A value judgment. Is the future version of Formula One worth the life it asks drivers to give? For Verstappen, that question seems open. And when a champion leaves that question open, everyone else has to react. Red Bull has to react because it cannot build a future around uncertainty. Every development plan, every driver market discussion, every sponsor conversation, every technical direction becomes shadowed by one fear. What if Max is not here?